Hi! In this video I will demonstrate panning options in Atmos, and I will show 3 approaches I used most of the time. What I am about to demonstrate are not rules, my goal is to show what's possible and give you some ideas. You can and should experiment. Let's start with the simplest and less experimental approach. You can see that everything is either panned to the center channel or left and right channels. Let's open up a mix a little bit, and I will start with the kick. The signal is coming only through the center speaker, which can sound small and boring. Divergence controls are sent to different speakers in the bed: front left and right, front rear divergence, rears and height. I'm going to send a bit of the signal to the left and right speakers from the kick. Let's pan it slightly forward. I also want to add a bit of weight to the kick. Let's use LFE for that. I'm going to use front divergence again. Let's push it forward. And now let's add height divergence to add a bit of air to the snare. The snare now sounds fuller and a bit more 3D. Hi-hat is an object, and instead of regular divergence controls, we now have an object size. It makes things sound bigger, but less focused if you do it too much. Toms we can leave in the left and right speakers. Overheads are an object, and what I will do is just elevate them a little bit and increase their size. You can already hear that drums have more depth and fullness. With the room mic we can be more experimental. I'm going to increase the size, and let's move it closer to the ceiling. But we also can try to place it behind the listener. But I like how it sounds in the front. The bass guitar I will treat the same as the kick. Increase the front divergence. Push it forward slightly. And I'm going to use the LFE channel. The guitar sounds a bit small and flat. I'm going to move it forward. Maybe elevate it just a tiny bit. And let's increase the size. I will need to do a bit of rebalancing, but I will deal with it later. The main keys track is stereo, and what I will do is angle it to balance it with the guitar. And let's elevate it. Now we have this kind of angled panning for the stereo keys track. The second keys track is mono, and I will just mirror the guitar's panning. Panning in Atmos has a very big effect on balances, so if you change the panning, most likely you will also need to adjust the balance of the mix. Overall, this approach is very simple. You just keep close to the speakers and keep the main tracks in the front. In more complex arrangements, you can pan tracks to different speakers, like background pads, background vocals, some percussion, etc. But let's move on and see what panning I actually used for this track. It's very similar to what we just did. We are still mainly keeping all tracks in the front, but now most of the tracks are unglued from the walls, so to speak. When I do this sort of panning, I imagine that I'm in a club or a concert hall, and there is a band performing on a stage in front of me. The kick has the same panning as in the previous example. For the snare I didn't use high divergence, but I elevated it. It creates a different balance between the speakers. Hi-hat and toms are unglued from the walls and kind of floating. Overheads are also elevated and brought a bit closer together. This way a bit of the signal from overheads is bleeding into the center channel, and I feel like it glues better with the kick and the snare. The room mic is placed above the drum kit, and I elevated the bass a little bit. The guitar and keys are also unglued from the walls and placed opposite each other. I'm sort of placing things where they would be placed on a real stage, But I'm not trying to be 100% realistic. You can and should exaggerate things and use all 3 dimensions. This approach creates a bit more depth and immersion. Everything sounds just a little bit more 3-dimensional. But if you like to experiment, the third approach is for you. Let's imagine that the listener is the drummer, and I'm going to pan tracks from the perspective of the drummer. Let's start with overheads. I will place them closer to the side speakers, elevate them a little bit, and increase object size. Let's look at the kick. I will push it forward, and because it's an object now, I'll increase the object size to make it sound bigger. Objects don't have direct access to the LFE channel, so I created an LFE bus to route the signal, and routed it to the LFE channel of the drum's bed. Now I can create a send from the kick drum to the LFE bus, and that's how you can use LFE for objects. Now let's move on to the snare. I will push it forward, elevate it, and increase size. I will place the hi-hat to the left of the snare. Just try to imagine that you have a real drum kit in front of you. Rag tom I will place to the left of the snare. And floor tom to the right. You don't need to try to create a realistic image of the drums. Listen to what sounds good and how tracks glue with each other. I will elevate the room mic. Let's place it somewhere above the listener and increase the size. Let's pan the bass guitar, which is an object too. I'm going to push it closer to the kick and the snare. And I will play around with elevation and size to make it glue better with the drums. Now, let's look at the guitar. I just try to imagine that I have a guitar player to the left of the drums, and slightly in front of me. Let's add elevation and increase the size. You might notice that I use the size parameter a lot, and it's just a personal preference. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. For the main keys track, I will keep the angled panning and place it opposite of the guitar. For the second keys track, I will just mirror the guitar. And we are done! This approach can create very immersive mixes, and you can place the listener inside of the music, which is very cool. As you can see, Atmos is very flexible, and you can do pretty much anything. Again, my goal is to just give you some ideas and show what is possible. I urge you to experiment and come up with a style, or several styles, that works for you. Those 3 approaches are what I use most of the time, but not always. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.